Kyle,
Dave,
how's it going, buddy?
it's going, man. We got to come up with a new, some new dialogue, I think, for the beginning of these.
Yeah, no, apparently my wife has called me out for this. I say Kyle the same way every single podcast, which I believe is consistency.
It is consistency. That's true. It's just, is it the type of consistency that brings viewers to the podcast?
Well, we won't have viewers for the next few years, honestly.
That may be true, but if Mr. T tells a friend, then we have two gym teachers potentially watching.
Honestly, that's probably my biggest complaint about this show. We don't have enough gym teachers.
He also had a pretty legendary reply on our YouTube this week.
Did he?
Yeah, no, I can't quote it verbatim because I don't have it up, but I should actually look before we started. But he said, imagine him watching the video with a toothpick in his mouth. Just because we had both had the toothpicks last week, we were sporting the toothpicks. He's been an avid listener. So, Mr. T, if you're here at 1 minute and 20 seconds into this podcast, thank you for being here. Also, get yourself a toothpick, the flavored ones, and I have some caffeine-infused ones, which are pretty.
Mr. T, honestly, I don't think you can handle the amount of nicotine that I take in a day. So, I'm just saying that from the get-go.
Yeah. If I had Mr. T's job, I would need copious amounts of caffeinated toothpicks just to stay awake, I think. So good on you, Mr. T. You do a job that I cannot do.
He does.
Dave, we have a few interesting topics this week to cover. One starting with a pretty detailed Lions and Packers game in Detroit. Would you like to start with your analysis from that game? How did you walk away feeling from the Detroit Lions game?
First of all, I'm going to take a dip of my Rogue pouch. It's not non-toothpick. See what it is? See? Yeah. Oh. Delicious.
For copyright purposes, we'll have to blur that out, I think.
Zero amount of woodenness. So I feel like looking back at that game, Kyle, it was something that I can say is nothing less than a tragedy. That game was something that I will look back on and I will regret for years. Probably a year or two, probably not too much. I might be overselling it. No, it was a bad game for the Packers, but it was also a great game for the Packers. Offensively, they were able to put up 31 points against the best team in the league, right?
31.
And they also lost, and they put up, 34 points? Their defense?
What is your question? You're saying
the Packers defense put up 34 points, right? Or they let go of 34 points?
Yeah, that we allowed 34 points, correct, yeah.
Yeah, it was one of the best and worst games of the year for the Packers. Offensively, they put it up. They did good against their defense. But then the Packers defense also just let it go. It was a bad game on that aspect of I don't know. It was just so bad. I'm sad the fact of anytime that we ever could catch up to them, they would instantly let the Lions back into the game. And there was no point in that game that you really ever, as a Packer fan, felt like you had control. Correct?
I feel like when we made some adjustments in the second half, I felt like we were more in control. When we finally took a lead, I thought that we'd be able to maintain it or swing the momentum, but that did not end up holding for very long.
See, I never felt like once that we would gain the lead, I never felt that we could actually maintain it after that. It was just that type of game.
Did you walk away thinking like any one particular play was the game changer, or did you feel like it was just such a close back and forth that, every play was crucial?
Honestly, close back and forth game. I think that there were a lot of plays on defense that I was happy about at the time, but ultimately it would be get squandered because the Lions would eventually drive down the field and do what they had to do.
Yeah, I mean it's a tough one to stomach, and I appreciate your take on it. I'm not in the it's a travesty boat necessarily. We both thought that this was going to be a closely contested game. I thought that it would be a 3 point game in Green Bay's favor, actually, but ends up being in Detroit's, which stings. It's a very good Lions team, and we can't talk about injuries necessarily with this one because the Lions are battling that too, right? Their best pass rushers out, they have linebackers out. Still very talented team with who they're missing, so we can't really sit and talk too much about injuries, honestly, because the Lions could say that same thing right back at us. So I don't think that's weighing the scales in the favor of the Packers for this particular argument. But I think that I was very disappointed with the start of the Green Bay Packers in this game. This is a game that you have to come out and you have to punch Detroit in the mouth early to make some kind of a statement, and not literally punch them in the face. Although Matt LaFleur did seem like he was close to punching a fan holding the American flag at the beginning of the game, but um, I would have been okay if you would have punched him. That'd have been fine with me.
Did he not go to bat for his player? Because there was some fan that was doing the little sign.
Yeah, I don't know what the full backstory was of why they got into it. I just knew that Matt was a little heated before the game got started, and then they were trying to kick the guy out. So, but I mean, to be fair, like you're on the field, just act like an adult.
Yeah,
That
no, I mean, if I'm there, I'm not acting like an adult at all. But that's just me.
Yeah, not you. I mean, you also smack adult women in the face at Packers games. So I'm surprised you're even allowed around football at all, to be honest, in
Allegedly,
public. But
well, that's alleged. That is an alleged thing that you have said. There's no proof to that one way or another. So,
if you're new to the podcast, the backstory is that Dave was celebrating once when we were at a Packer game and accidentally, quote unquote, smacked this lady smack dab in the face while trying to give her a high five after a touchdown. So
well, if we really want to go deep into that, I was about to high five that woman, and then somebody jujitsu'd my arm partially to the left.
I don't think that's what happened. Either way,
I
we'll
think that's
we'll
what happened.
we'll
Well,
breeze, we'll breeze past your assaultive tendencies and get back to the Packers Lions game here.
yeah,
Um,
alleged assault. Alleged.
um, I was really
Alleged.
disappointed in the in the start for Green Bay. I thought that being down 10-0 already going into the second quarter was such a huge negative for the Green Bay Packers in this game because they didn't start fast. And when you don't start fast and you're on the road and you're in hostile territory and it's a division game, you have so much weighing against you that's just hard to swing momentum. It's not, the crowd's not going to be into it in your favor. Everybody's going to be against you. And it's just very hard to battle back from being down early in a game like that. So I'm glad that they were able to. They did bounce back. They did show some fight. It was a very back and forth battle between the two teams and two very good football teams, obviously. But um, we were down 17-7 at halftime, and I think that's a hard thing to overcome. If that's a touchdown closer for the Packers, I think that's a much more obtainable score to go into halftime at. But unfortunately, that's not what happened. So the Packers had to bounce back. We end up getting a touchdown right out of half. Jacobs was on fire in terms of not necessarily rushing yards or average, but he scored 3 touchdowns in this game. So he was doing his part, trying to run some people over on his way to the goal line, and he was able to be somewhat successful in that. Jordan Love bounced back in the second half and had some good passing plays, used his legs a little bit. I'd like to see that. Um, but the Packers just couldn't maintain the lead. There's a big lead swing in this game when Nixon had an interception off of Goff, and it put us in position for another touchdown run by Jacobs. And we went up 21-17 at that point, and that was a pretty big swing because we had been down 17-7. So, to be up now by 4, I think that was your chance. Like now we got to hold it. Now we got to solidify it. We got to play. We got to go play football. That's your that's your big moment of the game in terms of the defensive side of the ball is, hey, let's go get our offense back in the field and go take control of this. And just unfortunately, we were not able to do that.
See, and
Now,
to me personally, that's why I don't think that slow start was that big of a deal, because the Packers were able to swing it around and get the lead. And then it just became the fact of our defense couldn't hold it up. They couldn't play from a lead. They just kept on giving up the big play after big play. And that's why this game was, in my mind, a travesty. Because when you look at it offensively, I feel like there were a lot of pieces that were missing out. You know, there were guys that didn't have a great game, and we still were able to shine. Where defensively, I mean, you get Jair Alexander back maybe, but does he make that big of a difference against the Lions? Does he really hold them to the point where they can't drive down the field like they did?
well, if to answer your question directly, does it change the outcome of the game? In my opinion, no, it doesn't. But the Lions are also very good, and they're like, this is a really good point that no one's probably going to talk about with this game, or at least few people will. The Detroit Lions are very good at doing something on the football field, which I think needs to be brought. It needs to have attention brought to it, and that is that although they used Jameson Williams in this game fairly frequently, and he had a good night, Tim Patrick was also a huge part of this offense, and it made the Packers have to divert from Amon-Ra St. Brown because they had to figure out this other guy now on the offense. And I think that was part of their game plan going in is, hey, how can we utilize some of these other guys so they're not just, keying on our number one, our wide receiver one here, who's had a great season. Amon-Ra St. Brown is like the second highest ranked wide receiver in the league right now in terms of like yards and touchdowns and total offense. So, he's not a slub, or anything on the offensive side of the ball. He's definitely a threat for them. Jameson Williams, same thing. But I think that was a good part of their game plan that they had in place was, hey, we're going to utilize some other wide receivers, get some other people involved just to make sure that we are able to find scoring opportunities. And they did that really well. That was a guy that no one had really heard much about until that game, and they did that great. And they, were able to let our best guys play St. Brown, and that opened up some opportunities for, coverage busts and stuff on the other side of the field. So good on them. I think that was a good game plan. I'm not going to, pat him on the back too much, but that's obviously a game plan that they had coming in, and it worked very well for them. Another game plan, which we have to talk about, Dave, and it made a big difference in the long run, is these fourth down plays. Now, Dave, when I play Madden or NCAA, like there are opportunities to go for it on fourth down, and you almost always make that decision because it is a video game, and there are no real life repercussions for that except for disappointments in your own feelings if you do not make it. But aside from that, there's no one that's going to fire you for for not converting your video games fourth down or criticize you in the media or any of that. I could criticize myself, I guess, via like X, and just actually that might be an interesting page just to criticize myself and the decisions that I make while playing those games. Uh, but outside of that, like Dan Campbell took some crazy, crazy risks in this game going forward on fourth down, which obviously they converted all but one. So you can't hate it too much in the outcome, but how do you feel about it? Like if Matt LaFleur was to start, utilizing the same philosophy, big game, fourth down situations, let's take the risk. How do you feel about that?
In the words of ACDC, I've got big balls, and he's got big balls, and she's got big balls, but we've got the biggest balls of them all. That was Dan Campbell's approach to this game. Dan Campbell was a man that he knows what he has in his team, and I do feel like down the road, this will cost Dan Campbell. But today, what if you go 1 for 5? Does Dan Campbell really get fired? Does he have anything to risk at this point? You're telling me so he has made the moves that he did, and he was risky, like too risky, honestly. That last fourth down call where you're already in field goal range and you're still going for it. Any other coach fails that, they're honestly being looked upon negatively, like to the point where do we fire them? Dan Campbell does not have that because he has coached a team that is at the time 11-1 and now 12-1. Dan Campbell has a privilege that no other team has right now. The man's got balls, and he can just call whatever he wants because ultimately, whether it affects him negatively or positively, he's turned this franchise around. Nobody's going to look on him and be like, why would you do that? Why is this until it's the playoffs and he affects his team negatively? He can do this. The man went out there with an amazing play calling streak, and he did things that nobody else could do in the league. I don't think there. Name one other coach. Maybe Mike Tomlin that has that type of a leeway that just there's that much respect that he can do whatever he wants. Andy Reid as well. So there's
Yeah.
two coaches I can name off the top of my head that can honestly go out and do that. He went out. He was 4 for 5 on fourth down. He played an amazing play caller game. I, good to you. That was what was the difference maker in the game. Because say he misses a few of those fourth down calls, they lose that game.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely a situation where I think they had four fourth down conversions, and some of those probably are less significant than others. But there's two standouts obviously that are right in the back of my mind. Um, and they had one which was a touchdown pass to Tim Patrick in the back of the end zone on like a busted coverage that Green Bay just kind of missed him going through the middle of the field, which I don't know how that happens, but that's not for me to dissect necessarily in this podcast. But um, so that was a big one there because then you're looking at a field goal instead, so that makes us a tie game at the end. And then if you take that last drive, the conversion where we left Green Bay absolutely no time to do anything on the clock because of how Detroit controlled the clock there at the end and was able to convert on a fourth down, which set them up for the game-winning field goal. I think that if you give Jordan Love and the boys 30 to 40 seconds to go work, I think that with McManus as your kicker, I think that that's feasible. So I think that you do have to take some chances and you do have to play some risk games when it comes to these big conference games or where there's a lot on the line. And I think the Lions played that very well. Unfortunately for the Packers, we were just not able to. We were able to kind of hold them back, but we weren't able to prevail in the end. And that's kind of the theme throughout the entire game to me. And I know you said that you didn't necessarily look at the slow start as a problem for the Green Bay Packers, but you have to think the Packers put up 31 points, or excuse me, 24 points in the second half of this game. So if you get, even 14 or 10 points in that first half, like, I just think that like you're looking at, and I know 10 points is only three more than what they had at the end of the first half, but like three more ties it at the end. So like it's just, you got to start putting points on the board. You have to start producing early in these games. You cannot get off to a slow start. And, they finished strong, but it just wasn't strong enough to beat them in the end. And I'd like to see them be able to go into enemy territory and stand our ground a little bit. And I feel like we got kind of bully balled through the entire first half. And then finally in the second half, we just had enough. But, we kind of showed our true colors. And I didn't walk away from this game angry. I'm definitely disappointed, but this was not a game that I walked away from and I was like, man, what a terrible performance by the Green Bay Packers. I thought that this was fairly cut and dry. A disappointing loss. You want to beat the Lions, you want to beat the division rival, you want to beat the best team in the NFL. But, losing by 3 on a game control type field goal is not the worst. Like I said, it stings for sure. It's not going to feel good. But as far as the overall play of the Green Bay Packers, I thought that they were contenders. They went out there and battled. They battled back from losing and being down 10 at the end of the first half. And I think they showed some grit. They showed that they can hang in there with the best and that, it wasn't just some weird cold weather fluke that kept the first game a little bit closer or something like that, right? Like we can hang with them anytime, anywhere. It just, the outcome might change as you go, and it might take some gritty play or some gritty play calling to get a victory over these guys because we know now that they're going to lay it all out there, all cards on the table when they meet us. So to me, it shows the Lions still think we're a threat. They're not overlooking us. They take us pretty serious no matter what they say in their pregame talks. And this is going to be a good rivalry for a little bit here because both teams are very skilled and they'll continue to be.
One thing I can say too is it's incredibly hard to beat a team 3 times in 1 year. I think that, what was it, 2003, that we had swept the Vikings, and then in the playoffs, Don McNabb's team was able to come back against us, and they were able to beat us in the playoffs. I think it was 2003. It might have been 2004. I was a child, so. But
Yeah, go ahead.
no, this just screams to me one of those games that, like you said, it was close enough. But I do think that there has to be better coaching. There has to be better play calling in the red zone. I think that also, like when it comes to calls, I'm not somebody who thinks that the refs are the ones that decide the game. That's not me. But there were a few calls that I didn't agree upon that could have went our way or just not in the Lions' way. Could have been no calls, and it would have been a closer game too. But you can't use that as an excuse. You just have to go forward and move on.
Yeah, I've never been big on one call changes the entire game. Especially when it comes to penalties. Was there missed stuff in this game? Yeah, absolutely. I was texting you about it when they took McKinney's helmet off. I thought that was a disgrace. Like not getting hit in the face on that was nuts. You just literally like extended the arm and punched the man's helmet right off his head, and it's not hands to the face. Like I don't know how that's not, but
And then
either
later
way,
on, you're calling Christian Watson for a pick call when he was just trying to run his route and literally avoid the defensive line or defensive corner, where he just moved out of the way, but they called him for it just because there was contact, and that took away a touchdown at the end. I
yeah,
mean,
I think that you have to be. I think that you have to be more. I don't know how you can when you're playing that fast, to be honest, but I think that it has to be like very, very apparent that you are trying to avoid contact. If you are not like very, very blatant about that, then I think they're going to call that every time because those pick plays are so hard for defenders to overcome. Even like when they're now, it's made to look like they're not intentional. Before they would run them, and they'd be like, "Oh, if it's called, it's called. If it's not, it's not." But
yeah.
I think it's come to the attention of the refs now, and it's very apparent that they're going to call that almost every time. So I don't even think that you can run, a very distinct in route on something like that. That even there's a chance of contact because you're kind of leaving that for open for interpretation for the refs to call. To be honest, and that's a risky game to play.
I feel like that's one of those calls that if it was in Green Bay, probably would have went our way.
Yeah, very likely, right? Um, I just I could talk about play calling and how to arrange the play sheet so that doesn't happen or something like that. But, I mean, that's a 50-50 play to me still.
You know what it
So,
probably was, Kyle? You know what it probably was? Mr. Kingsley JJ Anagbare running into that ref. He shoulder checked him, Kyle. He shoulder checked him. That was something that I would do to a beta male. If he was walking up against me, I would check him to let him know his place. Anagbare did that to the line judge, and then he was salty about that for the rest of the game, Kyle. I think that if you're the referee, you got to get over that. You got to be okay with that, man. Anagbari is a man. He is a man among boys when it comes to the referees. He only walked. He was thinking about his mother's spaghetti plate walking to that sideline because Mama Anagbari makes a mean spaghetti plate. He had no ill intention. He was walking, and then a man that's 150 pounds less than him happened to bump into him, and he fell backwards. Oh, my shoulder. Oh, I have to be out for now for 15 plays. I think that is disgraceful. Disgraceful that the referees held that against the Green Bay Packers. Mama Enigbari's spaghetti is like one of those one shots. You only get one chance to blow, and they blew that opportunity in life, you know?
Yeah, that is an interesting theory for sure on what happened. We haven't confirmed that obviously with the refs, but that is a
Oh no,
hot
I've
take.
confirmed it. I've had Mama and Higbari spaghetti. They've invited me over. Big fan of this show. They do love our show indeed, and I've hung out with the Enigbari family quite a bit, more than you have. But you know, I'm just more of a people person than you, Kyle, and that's why I get into these plates like you have not.
Well, uh, if you'd like to bring leftovers sometime from the spaghetti, I'd gladly accept them.
That's more on Kingsley Enigbari than it is me, Kyle. That's more on him than it is me.
All right, let's move on. There's a lot of aftermath in this Packers Lions game. It seems like some of the players on the Packers and Lions, kind of like intermingle in friend groups and stuff like that. So you have, like St. Brown, who does a St. Brown Brothers podcast, and he's on with Jaden Reed and stuff from time to time. And they,
Yeah.
kind of smack talk back and forth. And there was some banter going on back and forth on social media between the players. Because Jaden had said something earlier in the season after the first game about, wait till I come to Detroit or whatever. And then Jameson Williams posted something saying, did he even show up? So, I like the banter, right? I like the kind of playful jabs and stuff like that. Something that I would do if I was playing. Um, especially if you're good friends with guys, you got to be able to make fun of each other and stuff too. But, um, and of course, there's all these Lions fans on social media, just like, oh, I love it. I'm just eating it alive. All this other stuff, right? Stuff that keeps the rivalry going. But Dave, the real question that needs to be answered here is: have the Detroit Lions overtaken the Green Bay Packers as the best team in the division? And I'm not talking about just the appearance. Yes, they have a better record. Are they a better football team? And if so, Dave, for how long?
I can probably say definitively yes, but I'll say for one move exactly. And I think I know exactly, I think you know where I'm going to go with this. There was a
I do.
move,
Unfortunately for us all, I do.
there was a move that happened at the trade deadline, Kyle. And I believe that Mr. Zadarius Smith was traded to the Detroit Lions. And Mr. Zadarius Smith had, what, one sack? Or was it 1.5 during this game?
I know one for sure.
Somebody who I pleaded this whole season to come to the Green Bay Packers went to the Detroit Lions, and he's already made the difference. I screamed from the rafters, Kyle. I said, bring my boy home. And you want to know where he went? The land of Detroit style pizza, which is disgusting, by the way. Why would you bake cheese into a crust? Why? That's a Sicilian pizza with cheese in the crust. It doesn't make sense. It never made sense. I'm mad. I'm mad that he went to the Detroit Lions, Kyle, and he made the difference in this game. Zadarius Smith is a gosh darn Green Bay Packer. I'm banging my table. I'm mad. He should have been a Green Bay Packer. There's no reason why we shouldn't have traded a 6th-round pick for him to be a Green Bay Packer, but instead he went to the gosh darn Detroit Lions and got a sack, and now they made the difference. That pass rush is better, not the Green Bay Packers pass rush. I'm mad. I'm mad. I am mad that was the piece that overtook the Green Bay Packers. Kyle, Zadarius Smith should have been a Packer. They should have brought my boy home. But yeah,
Dave,
no, Detroit Lions have they've overcome us for right now. Playoffs could be a different they could be a different game. It's hard to beat a team 3 times in a row, so we'll see from there. What's your thoughts, Kyle?
Dave, I don't have any thoughts about Zadarius Smith. I have many a thought about that rant. That's probably one of the best ones you've had since we've started this, so thanks for that. Uh, oh, are they a better football team, Dave? Yes, I think that undeniably so. You have to say that the Detroit Lions are a better football team, and I mean, especially when it comes like there's arguments maybe to be made about offensively. Who is the better team, but when it comes down to it, the Lions' defense is just better. It's just better. And, we've talked about a lot of defensive pieces that the Packers can add or that are struggling currently on the roster this year. And whether the Lions have that or not, I don't know because I'm not a fan of the Detroit Lions. I do not watch all of their games. So I'm more keen to knowing about what the Packers are doing, the whisperings of the franchise that we hold near and dear to our heart. But I definitely don't know what the Lions' struggles are defensively, but I know that it's not looking as terrible for them as it is in the Green Bay Packers secondary, specifically the D line, specifically in the linebacking core. So it's not looking the same. If you were to match up all the players, I think that you find that the Detroit Lions are a lot stronger there than the Green Bay Packers are. So. And there's exceptions to that position by position, but overall, the defense is better. The Detroit Lions are better. For how long? It's a good question. It really is. It makes you think, how long can the Lions sustain this? And sometimes, Dave, let me just throw this out there. This is the best case for the Green Bay Packers, is that the Lions make a long, deep run into the playoffs this year and lose. Okay. And I'm not talking about a first round exit that keeps you hungry for the next year. Like, man, we almost had it this year. Let's do it again next year. I need the long push, the victories, the celebrations, the trophies, the raising, the fan base to get hyped, and then to be let down and smashed to smithereens in the end. That's what I need to happen. And it's not because I want to point a finger at a Detroit Lions fan in their face and say that they are awful and we knew it the whole time. It's because what that does to a franchise, Dave, is it demoralizes you. And we've been a party to that many times in Green Bay over the years, especially in the Aaron Rodgers era. I mean, my God, how many times do we have our heart broken while we were pushing for the Super Bowl? So that can be very, very tough to stay hungry during that. And I think that if the Detroit Lions make a very long push but are shattered in the end, I think that kind of plays with how hungry you are the following year. So I think that is the best. I think that is the best thing for the Green Bay Packers. Um, so I don't have a definitive timeline on how long the Detroit Lions will be at the top. But if it's a long playoff push this year and a shattered ending, I'd say not for long, to be honest. And I'd say that Minnesota could be on the rise next year, that Chicago with a good coach. It sounds like they might acquire the Detroit Lions OC for their head coaching job next year. So that might be interesting if that plays out. It could be very scary for the Chicago Bears to have that threat. And I see the playoff push with a shattered ending, taking the Lions out for next year, as soon as next year, I should say. And then I also see there being some kind of timeline involved with Jared Goff. How long does he stay?
You know,
Like
like I
like
said
how
before,
like shoot me a timeline. How long do you think Jared Goff stays in Detroit?
thing is like I think that he resigns in Detroit. I think that he knows that he's got his bread and butter in Detroit. Plus, you got Sonic and Knuckles. You have Montgomery and Gibbs. You have a good offensive team, but I don't want to undersell the Green Bay Packers yet. I think that this was a competitive game. when you get this into the playoffs, do the Packers still stand a chance? Yes. I don't think that this is a team that we can write off yet. I think the Packers being 9-4, I don't think that they're a team that's just going to bend over the Lions. I don't think they're a team that's going to bend over to the Vikings. I don't think they're a team that's going to bend over to the Eagles. This could still be a team that makes a run. Just because in the regular season you lose some games doesn't mean that you're just eliminated in the playoffs. You just have to get in that dance. And I think Green Bay Packers are still a team that can be in the dance. Do I think that the Lions are going to be a team that's good for a while? Yes. Especially when you have a team that has traded for amazing players. Already made my rant. But when you have a team that's willing to make that change and, put it all on the line to make that play, does the Lions have a good chance of making it? Yes. Do they have a good chance of being good for a few years? Yes. But I don't want to underrate what the Green Bay Packers are. I don't want to think that they are just going to be a one and done in the playoffs or a two and done now. Don't get rid of the Green Bay Packers yet. Don't give up on them. That's something that I have to say. Don't you forget about me. Don't you? Don't you?
Somebody should make a song about that.
Somebody should.
Yeah, none of my kudos to the Detroit Lions or speculating how long they'll be good for is to say that Green Bay won't also be right there. I think with some defensive help and maybe a little bit of offensive help, I think they could very 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 easily overtake them. It just is, it comes down to like what happens when we meet. To be honest, in the games and who's going to show out, and the Packers have the talent to beat them, but they don't have the talent to slaughter them, but they have the talent to beat them. And it's just going to take, like we said before, it's going to take some coaching decisions, and it's going to take some players stepping up to the plate to perform, and that's what it's going to take for this team to be elite and to beat the Detroit Lions. So,
and you're also assuming that Dan Campbell, he's going to make that risky call. Not every single time is going to work out for him. I feel like at some point in this offseason, whether it's during the playoffs or during a Super Bowl, if they get there, I don't think that you're always going to get every single play to go your way. I think that the Detroit Lions could honestly shoot themselves in the foot because of Dan Campbell's style. This isn't something that I think is 100% guaranteed that the Lions are just that team.
Yeah. What happens with the decision making long term is kind of meh to me. Like, I think that he's a guy that's going to gamble, he's going to take risks, and the franchise has already accepted that of him. So like, he's not going to be under any scrutiny, like you're saying, right? Like him, the Andy Reids and Mike Tomlins of the world, like they're not worried about backlash from the decisions that they're making because they've already established they can make the big time calls. They prove it every time they go out and plan, for a football game, then it's executed out there on the field. So they don't have to worry about backlash for that kind of thing, like a first year coach would be or something like that, who's under some heat for the record or the team's performance or whatever. But when you're 12-1, you can make those kind of decisions because you're 12-1. And so to bring this back full circle and to say how long will the Detroit Lions be good for? I don't know. How long is Jared Goff good for? Like that is like literally like my timeline for the Lions. Like there's no downside on the defensive side of the ball. They're young. They've had a ton of draft picks that are now developing in that franchise because they were terrible for so long. They've had time to add pieces. They've had time to rebuild. They did that successfully. They acquired a guy in Jared Goff that they wanted, and he's performing well now, for them. So I think that timeline is how long is Jared Goff good for? Like, I don't know.
And is he that guy too? Is Jared Goff really the difference maker when it comes down to it? Or is he just the guy that is making the right call when it's needed?
Yeah, I mean, like Jared Goff, and I know you're going to disagree with me on this, but like Jared Goff is a Purdy to me. Like you are a above average quarterback in a very, very good system, like, which to me is like still impressive. Like, you're playing in the NFL, you're an elite quarterback nonetheless. But like, but are you like top five to me? No. Like, so like I don't, and not, I'm not
Well,
talking about
Brock
all
Purdy
time.
is, but Jared Goff is not.
I just like, I struggle with that. How good is Jared Goff? Really? So, and I think that like he can maintain his confidence in this offense and be very good. And they've obviously like adapted to his play style and found things that work for him and for the other guys in the team. So like, I don't know. We'll see how good you know, he's good for. But like, to like the other point that can be made here is like take one of the top five quarterbacks and insert it into that Detroit offense. Like, I think that is like it is way more threatening to think about. Um, I don't know. Give me like one. I mean, the best. Who's the best quarterback in the league right now?
I would say either Lamar Jackson or a Joe Burrow.
Yeah, I mean, put Joe Burrow in the Lions offense and tell me that that team isn't terrifying. Like, I
Team's
mean,
undefeated.
they're already scary, right? But like, I think that like you throw Joe Burrow in that offense, like that, it's a wrap.
Yeah.
Like, I'd be much more terrified of the Detroit Lions if they had a different quarterback. So my point is like there's worse things that could happen, like to the Green Bay Packers in this rivalry, than have Jared Goff at quarterback for the Detroit Lions. Like, if they draft a quarterback this offseason, I'd be like, oh, we have a problem here. This is going to be bad, right? Like, because they're if they start this like building process, and like that seems like some of the teams are kind of catching on, like, hey, Green Bay's doing this well, we can do that too, right? Then like, yeah, I would say that's probably a bad day, and like this could last a lot longer than you want it to. But for right now, for today, they are only as good as like Jared Goff keeps this consistency. That is as long as they're good for, and that's it. So like we'll see how long it lasts. To be honest, I know it's not a definitive timeline, but it is an interesting argument. Is like, how long are the Detroit Lions going to be good for? Is it just a season thing? And it might be if they make a playoff push and get shattered. We'll see. So moving on past that, Dave, we have probably the most competitive conference right now in the NFL. And it's not even probably, it is the most competitive conference. We have acquired 30 wins in the NFC North, but I believe I forget the number of losses, but it's to each other. So uh, and then the Bears are the kind of like the exception, the outsider to that, because they've lost some games that are not NFC North opponents, but still a very competitive division. The Bears should be much better than they are. They're kind of playing. Uh, they're just kind of playing that. How do I want to say this? They're playing to the narrative of their season. It just seems like we have a head coach who's fired now. We have a quarterback who is its first year, and we're just going to kind of coast through and try to figure this out along the way. But like, if we make mistakes and we play terrible games of football, that it doesn't matter that much because we lost our head coach and we have a first year quarterback. Like, that's kind of what it seems like the Bears are doing at this point. And if they win along the way, then it's just an added bonus. But they're kind of like, meh, toss the hands up in the air. We're just already thinking the next season. So, you know, that rivalry is kind of on hold, I think, because they're kind of at that bottom tier of the NFC North right now. But we have the Lions in first place in the division. We have the Vikings right behind them, who just smacked Atlanta today in Atlanta. And then, we have the Packers, who are holding on to third place right now. Dave, what or who is the Packers' biggest rival right now
I
in the
feel like
NFC North?
I feel like it depends on who you're looking at down the road. Is JJ McCarthy really going to be a difference maker for the Vikings? If he comes back and he plays good, yeah, the Vikings are going to be a problem for a while. Does Jared Goff keep on doing what he's doing? Does he keep on being that guy who can be a difference maker? Then yeah, the Lions are. But it's such a in in a deliberate fact. Like, and the Bears, like, if they get a good offensive coordinator and a good offensive coach behind Caleb Williams, they could be that team that makes a difference. It's hard to say in the NFC North. It's such a transition period for the North that there's nobody I can definitively say, like, that's number one. Like, now, who do I root for the most against? I hate the Vikings. I've always hated the Vikings. I look at the Minnesota Vikings and I think that's the team that's always been the most competitive with us. Now, do I think the Bears are going to be a lot better? Yes. Do I think the Lions are just an NFC chokehold right now? Yes. It's just so hard to predict. If I were to say, I think that JJ McCarthy is going to come back and be good for the Vikings. So I think that's longevity wise, I think that's the team that you look out for the most. Do I think the Bears are also the team that is going to be good down the road? Yes. But right now, for me, it's the Vikings. Right now, I'm seeing Minnesota playing the way that they're playing. And granted, a year from now, a lot of those players aren't going to be on that team. You're not going to have Aaron Jones playing. You're going to have bigger contracts that are going to knock some guys off. But I think the Minnesota Vikings, for me, are the team that I fear the most down the road. What about you?
I think you made some excellent points in, like selecting the Vikings in that argument. There's just a lot of what ifs in the Vikings argument. Like you said, is JJ McCarthy the difference maker? I don't know how you throw away Sam Darnold, to be honest with you. After the year that he's having in this offense, I don't know. You might consider sitting JJ.
Yeah,
I have no.
not a bad idea either. Jordan Love sat for 3 years, you know?
I think with Darnold playing the way that he's playing, I think that like he is going to be eaten up immediately if they do anything else but retain him. To be honest with you, I mean, there's going to be teams from all over that want him as their QB1 after this season, and like he might go somewhere else in a different system and fail epically. But I think when he's succeeding in this system, and this system right now in Minnesota is working. So what they're going to want to do is they're going to want to coach up the young kid in the system that's working and have him watch and compete with a quarterback who's being successful in it. So I think that it's very possible that Minnesota just retains Sam Darnold, keeps him as a quarterback one, and they sit JJ McCarthy and give him some, preseason experience and maybe even a little bit of experience throughout the season next year, and just kind of play it by ear and say, hey, like if Darnold goes down, like you're our guy, 110%, and we want you to be the guy long term. But I think there's just a lot of what ifs with that. So like that situation's kind of a question mark for me in Minnesota, even though like there's potential for them to be really good. There's potential for that to go downhill, or for the Vikings to just like fumble it completely with Darnold, and then they end up with this first year quarterback. So who knows, like how that'll end up turning out. So like I don't hate the Vikings, um, you know, when it comes down to it. The Chicago Bears really are the ones that I think that we're going to have the biggest problem with, to be honest. And I'm not talking about just like competitiveness within the division, but I think they're going to be contenders and they're going to be for real. And all it's going to take is for them to, like you said, figure out some kind of offensive play calling that utilizes Caleb Williams how he's supposed to be utilized. The man is extremely mobile. He has a great arm. Um, and I know I called him a garbage receptacle a couple of podcasts ago, but like truly, like all jokes aside, right? Like he is actually a very good quarterback, and that is the only time that I'm going to sing his praises on here, most likely. But like truthfully, yes, he's a talented quarterback. Could he be something in the NFL? Yes. Could he still be a bust? I guess. But like I've seen him pass for 300 plus yards and like four touchdowns. So like he has the potential to be great. Um, it's
We need
just can
something
he?
around him right now. And this is his rookie season, so we really can't grade him as what he is right now. He's not a finished product.
Yeah, I see like for me, it's hard to envision the Vikings, right? Like right now, like going into next year, like when you're talking about rivalry, you're talking about longevity, right? So like you're talking about like what does the franchise look like? In 5 years down the road, what's the most competitive teams in the conference or something like that? I think that's for me. That's the Chicago Bears and the Green Bay Packers, kind of rekindling this rivalry. It's the one that's like the closest in terms of games traded back and forth, wins, losses. The Bears have a good defense. The Packers have a good offense. And I think the scales will always be slightly like imbalanced one way or the other for the Packers and the Bears to continue to fight this out, to continue to grind it out in the division. And so while the rivalry isn't the biggest one this year, I think it's the biggest one that we need to pay attention to going forward is where do the Bears end up? And not to sleep on them or think that like, oh, well, they have this guy who's new and, they're in all this disarray that they're not a threat within the division. I think they are the biggest threat to the division, if I'm being honest with you. That defense is very good in Chicago. Don't let anybody fool you. Don't let their record fool you. They are a good football team defensively. Still some pieces to add for sure, but like they are a good football team. Um, and they have an up and coming offense. They have the pieces. They have the pieces to do it and be elite. They just aren't quite there yet. And by next year, I think that is ample time for them to draft other players, to fill some pieces, to fill a head coaching position, to change some culture. I would not be surprised to see them do some kind of what is the what's the preseason thing they always do
From
with the
worst to
teams? Hard knocks. That's it. I would
Oh,
not. I would not. I would not be surprised to see them do a Chicago Bears Hard Knocks with the second year Caleb Williams and a new head coach. That would not surprise me at all, and get the season hyped up, and they will be competitive. So I
did they not
think
already
that
have Hard Knocks locale?
they did, Dave. But who's to say that you can't run it back?
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, like, I think that team you add, just saying, Ben Johnson as an offensive coordinator now to a head coach position, that could be a team that is a little bit more dangerous. And you get a few defensive pieces, you get something that is more consistent for them. I don't see the Bears being a bad team in longevity. I don't know. I feel like there's always going to be that like curse almost that's in Chicago where Minnesota just doesn't have that.
Yeah, I just like if you're asking me who's the biggest problem this year, obviously it's the Vikings or the Lions because we're going to see them down the road somewhere in the playoffs, right? Like inevitably we'll most likely see one of those teams in the playoffs. If things go well for the Packers and don't go catastrophically wrong for them, they should overtake whatever opponent they see. We should overtake whatever opponent we see, and we'll end up in some kind of rematch regardless. Well, it'll be the trio game where we've seen now 3 times in the year, whether that's Detroit or Minnesota, just kind of the way that the cookie crumbles. But so if you're asking me this year, obviously it's one of those two teams is the biggest rival, but I don't think that's what makes it the biggest rival in general. I think that's like just like what like the point of contention for the year, but it's not necessarily the biggest rivalry going forward. I think that the rivalry between the Packers and Bears has kind of dwindled down this year, but it will rekindle next year and burn brighter, I think, next year and will come to light when they're a little bit more of a threat. So I think that you'll see that being the biggest rivalry in the NFC North
Yeah.
come next year and forward.
Only time will tell on that one, but
All right. Speaking about as the cookie crumbles, Dave, we have a lot of question marks as to how this playoff picture will look. And, we've seen a lot of crazy things happen in Green Bay in the playoffs over the years. And we've had our hearts and dreams crushed many, many, many a time, getting our hopes up too early or thinking that this is the year. And to our own credit, it's been close many times without many cigars, unfortunately. And the last Super Bowl victory that we have, Dave, was when the Packers were a wild card team. The Packers were a wild card team and pretty much upset the narrative that wild card teams couldn't come in and take it all the way, and we did, and ultimately got a victory over the Pittsburgh Steelers and brought the trophy home where it needed to be. But could this be another one of those years? is my question to you.
I feel like so many things have to hit right. Do the Packers have the team that can? Yes. It's just defensively they need to get better, and I don't know if we have the pass rush that can really overtake games like we had in 2010. Like if
So,
you look back at that Super Bowl. Go ahead.
so if you not is it the question is not do we have the potential to go to the Super Bowl as a wild card? The question is more what seed fits the Packers best for the playoff run, right? Like, do we want, obviously we're not going to be the first seed anyways. The Lions are going to take that in the NFC. But what seed benefits the Packers the most? What team do we want to see first? Obviously, like I'm kind of getting into the hype around the college football playoff and stuff right now because guys are like, oh, we have this team, this road to the playoffs is or this road to the championship is like right there for this team because of who they get, right? It's all who they fall and play first. And I don't know if there's in your mind a path to the Super Bowl that is the best for the Green Bay Packers, but if there is one, what is your take on that?
I feel like this isn't a year that it's going to make a difference, honestly. If the Packers get the 5 seed, 6 seed, or 7 seed, I don't see us hosting a playoff game. I don't think that. I think Detroit is going to win through at least to the NFC Championship game, or say even if they fall out, I feel like Philadelphia Eagles is going to be another team that's going to have a strong showing. So, is this a team that if we get the 5 seed, do we host a playoff game to the Super? No, I don't see it. I think this is a team that it does not matter. Give me still either the 5 or 6 seed, depending on how Minnesota finishes up. But this is the team that's going to have to go on the road if they really want a chance to win the Super Bowl. Do I think they can do it? Yes. Do I think they can win in Philly? Absolutely. Do I think they can win in Detroit? Absolutely. They were just 3 points away from winning in Philly. This is the team that might not be a team of destiny yet. They just have to get their pass rush going. They have to get a team just playing complementary ball to win. And they can get hot just like any other team can get hot. Do I think the Packers are the team of destiny like they were in their last Super Bowl run? Not quite yet. I don't feel it yet. But they are a team that can win it.
Yeah, I think that being a lower seed, just with the stipulation of it all, I think benefits the Green Bay Packers. And I'm not talking about intentionally losing games or putting yourself in a position to be the lowest seed. Uh, you know, we just need teams. We just need to be the hot team. With the hot hand come playoff time. But I would like to see them come in as a little bit lower seed to be slept on a little bit by everybody and think, it's just the Green Bay Packers. We're worried about those Detroit Lions, and then we come and run right through you. So, there's still a tough road to the playoffs ahead. There's a lot of teams that are kind of on the up and up, and we will see how this all shakes out in the end. But I think the Packers still have a good shot, regardless of how this all shakes out and what seed that they get come playoff time. You're right. I would like to see them play at home, but sometimes accepting your destiny in these kind of things is for the best. And if I remember correctly, the Packers had to waltz into in the Super Bowl run. We had to waltz into New Orleans and to Atlanta and win both games. Is that correct?
We had to go through Philly, we had to go through Atlanta, and we had to go through Chicago.
Then we beat New Orleans.
We did not for the Super Bowl run.
Oh, well, then I am sadly.
There was a game against the Giants that we had to win in Lambeau, but we ended up beating them. And then we had to win a game against Chicago at the Packers Field at Lambeau, and then we beat them. And then in the playoffs themselves, we beat Philly with Mike Vick. Then we went to Atlanta, destroyed them completely, and then after that, we had to go to Chicago and beat them.
Well, your memory certainly serves you a lot better than mine is apparently because I'm all caught up on that season and must have got that one wrong. But now I have this running through my head. But either way,
we beat it was New Orleans. We beat the season after we won the Super Bowl. So we won the Super Bowl, and then they came to us week 1. That was actually Randall Cobb's like first game ever as a Packer, and we
I don't know
beat
why
them.
I'm remembering New Orleans then. But
Yeah,
anyway,
it was a 2011 versus 2010. You know,
yeah. Well, my point's coming full circle back to sometimes it's easier to accept that you are just in the position that you're in and you have to go and fight through it. And, like that the odds aren't going to always be in your favor. And for this playoff run, the Packers might have to accept that, hey, there is another team in the NFC that's been playing bully ball all year and they're going to have home field advantage most likely. Or, hey, listen, like we have some tough division opponents, so we're not going to have home field advantage throughout the playoffs. And that's just the way that it is. Is it what we want? No. Do we know that there's an advantage to playing in Green Bay, at Lambeau Field? Of course we know that. It's a great fan base, great place to play the game. But all in all, I think that you just have to accept it. And you can just come in as the underdogs and say, like, hey, we're going to take it to them no matter where we play. And you just keep that attitude every single time that you play. I would like to see them come in on the road first and just kick the crap out of somebody, to be honest.
yeah.
And then you can keep that same mentality throughout the entire playoff run, and eventually you make a run at it. So we'll see what happens. There's still a lot to unfold with that, but I just starting to look at the playoff picture and stuff like that. I thought, hey man, let's try to see where it would be most beneficial for the Packers to fall.
This
So
team is going to have to be rough. This team is going to have to be gritty. They're going to have to do things that they haven't done during the regular season yet. They have to get more pass rush. They have to be more consistent. And honestly, if you add a few of the pieces that they were missing out on with injuries, they have more potential to. If you add Jair, I feel like you're a better team. Are you somebody who can, were the Packers one piece away from winning against the Detroit Lions? No. They weren't a Jair Alexander away from winning, but that's just that game. You never know when it comes to the playoffs. Anything can happen. You just have to make it in the dance, which I believe the Green Bay Packers will. Which reminds me, we're actually about to face a team that we might see in the playoffs this year. So Sunday Night Football, we're playing the Seattle Seahawks, Kyle. Uh, do you see how they're coming into this season so far? Do you have any type of prediction? I believe the Seahawks are 7-5. I don't know where they're at this week, but
they are playing the Cardinals today, I believe, and that is a pretty big one because I think there's some kind of results based on the winner of that game. So I think Minnesota could clinch today with a Seahawks victory. I think that's how that's going to work, or something like that. It's something weird. I don't know how that's going to all work here.
yeah.
I was doing it a little bit earlier, but the Seahawks are a good football team, and it should not be slept on the fact that they have lost a game or two more than the Green Bay Packers. This is like an older 2000s rivalry for the Green Bay Packers too. Let's not forget. The Russell Wilson days in Seattle were not good times in the NFC for the Green Bay Packers when we would meet. So having this be over some kind of playoff contention and playoff rankings and stuff like that, like it's to me a game that Green Bay is going to want to come in with a chip on their shoulder, because this team is a team that likely still has some pieces that are there that like to kick the crap out of the Green Bay Packers, to be honest with you.
But the
So
Green Bay Packers still are the better team and should obviously walk over them.
they are the better team. This is in Seattle. So, I think this is a tough one to try to predict accurately. But
Yeah.
why don't you give me your score prediction, and I will just feed off of you and try to bully you.
I think this is looking at Seattle and looking at how they're winning. If you add back a Jair Alexander, if you add back, say our safeties, I don't know where we're at with. I think Evan Bullard isn't going to play. I think that he might be out for a season. They said he came out on crutches. I feel like Evan Williams might end up still playing. There's pieces that I think the Packers should still be able to comfortably win. If the Packers walked out of this game, say 31-14, it wouldn't surprise me. But the Seahawks could also pull the upset. Who knows? But I do think the Packers should comfortably walk away from this one.
That's your prediction, huh?
Yep.
I'm just going to write that down. Don't mind me.
31-14.
Well, now I have to be different. I wasn't going to say 31-14, but I was going to say 30 for the Green Bay Packers. I'm going to keep that number and go 30. You know, the Seahawks are kind of on a roll right now. I don't know what Kenneth Walker is out with today because it seems like Charbonnet is running the football for them today, and he's running it quite well, it would seem. So I think that's a little bit of a problem because he is a younger guy. He's definitely agile, and he has big burst play potential. So I could see that being a little bit of an issue. Gino, I could see making a couple mistakes, throwing a pick or two. Depending on how we play them. So I just think our defense has to come up and show up, and I think for the most part they'll do that. I'm going to go 30-21, I think, here, and we'll stick with that. Yeah, I think the Packers will do enough, but I think there'll be some moments where we're scared, as with every Packer game. But yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Wrapping up, Mr. T, I'm sorry I didn't have a toothpick today.
Don't worry, I did. I'm so reliable. I stole one from the kitchen.
Yeah, no, we will we'll do better for you next week, Mr. T. Hopefully I'm over this cold finally. This week was pretty rough for me. We were actually supposed to record tomorrow or yesterday, and then I kind of dropped the ball. So we'll see.
It's all right, it all worked out. But all right, man. Well, as usual, thank you for being here. Sorry that Za'Darius got brought up. I know it's a tough topic for you, but we
It
made
will
it through.
always be a tough topic until we bring my boy home. Hopefully, maybe off-season signing next year. Za'Darius comes home. We'll see.
The Lions are going to retain him. Anyways,
Probably will.
we'll see what happens. All right, dude.
Always a good time.
Sir.
Peace.